One Punch Man Season 3 Episode 7 was decent. A lot of removed scenes, probably the episode that has the most removed scenes so far. But I surprisingly enjoyed it much more than the previous ones, and that's even when talking about Orochi vs Garu. Now I'm not saying it's really good, but it's not that bad either. I think maybe that's the product of not really expecting much. Some scenes were cool to me and others not so much. But anyways, let's talk about the positives and the negatives of this episode. Unlike the previous episode where they removed a lot of scenes before Evil Eye shows up, they actually replayed the whole scene and added more. Well, the scene of the trains floating in the sky is still removed, but they added monsters coming out of buildings and seeking Gar's reaction. I think that's overall a good thing. I also think that the neon filter this episode was placed correctly. It didn't bother me as much as it did in the previous episodes. The soundtracks at the start were well placed and rhymed with what's happening in the episode. There are times where they were off, but overall I think they were placed really well. I also didn't feel like the pacing this episode is that weird unlike the previous ones, and maybe that's partially because it's an action episode. Now, I was against the Blue Lock aura when the trailer came out, since I thought maybe they were going to spam it on all characters, but surprisingly enough, I actually liked how they used it on Tatsumaki. The art was good, the animation of her hair was smooth, and the way they blurred out the background fit well with how tense the scene is. The only thing I didn't like, which is not really that important, is the optical flare they used on her eye. I think it was not necessary, but I'm only giving this criticism from a video editor point of view. The whole scene of Tatsumaki and Evil Eye flying in the sky was good. The wind effect was smooth, and I liked the scene of the heroes reacting to that fight. The art on the other hand at times were questionable, but it's much better than before. One-shotter looking really good at this scene. Even fodder monsters are not looking wonky at some shots, which is much appreciated. The action scenes are obviously broken, but I did like the pacing of some moments. Like for example, Shadow Ring decapitating this monster, they did portray her speed beautifully in my opinion. Gearspur's helmet is actually corrected now. Instead of that weird writing they had before, it now says ESP, which is short for Esper. We're also going to talk about Rhino Wrestler later much more, because his scenes are what bugged me in this episode, and not because of the movements, but actually because of deleted scenes. Now, I really liked how they portrayed Atomic Samurai's instantaneous slash scene, where they stopped the music and put a slight dark scene to showcase he already finished his attack. I think that's the way it needed to be done, which takes us to the best two scenes in the entire episode in my opinion. Atomic Samurai using his toothpick to kill these fodder monsters was so smooth, and the way he killed them after also looked good. But I actually really liked the way they reworked or reanimated Flashy Flash's scene. He now looks much better than before. Remember, this man in the teaser didn't even have a chin, and the way he killed the monsters looked very stiff and slow. But now in this episode, the scene is well animated and he does look pretty fast. The black scene in the background often does indicate that time is stopped in anime production, especially when the background is shown after. I think this was a really good way to showcase how fast he is. So really good job with this one. I even like the sound effects and the additional scenes they used for Darkshine when he started running towards the monsters. It just indicates how heavy he is. I also liked the heroes entering through different routes. The cave, the train station, the hallway, they all looked nice. Now let's talk about the cadre/executive's introduction. I guess if you look at the scene without reading the manga, it would look fine. It's not bad. I know some people would say that they use the neon filter, but it's not really the case. The compositing is different. It's not really as bad as what we're accustomed to see. So to be perfectly honest, it generally looked fine to me. But again, the lack of transitions is always jarring, as one scene you have Giru looking up and the other she's looking down. No transitions in between. Some manga readers, I'm guessing, would hyperanalyze the scene and say that here in this instance, Giru should have looked this way instead of looking forward. Both Ugly Fury and Black S were supposed to talk instead of just Black S saying the whole thing, and they are supposed to animate the flame around Orochi, but instead in this scene they left it out. These kinds of stuff aren't really major issues. The scene for me didn't look the best, but it's still fine. Now let's talk about the negatives of this episode. Obviously the main one here is the many removed scenes, and believe me when I say they actually removed the best scenes in the surface battle. You see, you as an only anime watcher don't even know how nice most of these heroes are. Needle Star, for example, has two cool scenes they removed. One where he defeated a monster with a baseball bat showcasing his perfect control over his chain, and the second best one is how he saved Mizuki Mizuki from Rhino Wrestler. I mean, just look at this, absolute peak. One-Shotter also has an additional scene where he killed a bunch of monsters and he after went hiding behind Puri Puri because his rifle was jammed. Rhino Wrestler does have more interactions with other heroes that they simply removed, so you're not really experiencing the real One Punch Man. Speaking of Rhino Wrestler, his fight with Iain wasn't really animated that well. Even their expressions isn't loyal to the source material. For example, Iain here is supposed to look like this, indicating his struggle against that one attack. The whole scene just doesn't hit the same anymore. Other countless removed stuff like Darshan lifting the bus to empty it from the monsters and Needlestar being a badass wearing his jacket to be serious, etc, etc. I also didn't like how they portrayed One-Shotter's bullets in this particular scene. It's like they're normal bullets, which they are not, no pressure at all. But anyways, the usage of OSTs were good in this episode overall, but sometimes it threw me off. Like I wasn't really digging Mizuki's OST that they played 2 times. Maybe it's a subjective thing, I don't know why, maybe it'll grow on me, but I just didn't like it. The scene of Puri Puri Prisoner barraging that monster with hits was much better in the teaser, and it's the only one they made worse. However, I'll go as much as to say it's watchable, and it does move, right? It just looks stiff and not fast. And since they corrected the Flashy Flash one, I didn't really mind it. Now when it comes to the art, it was good at many moments, as much as it was bad at some scenes. Like Mizuki here looking weird and many random shots of heroes. And I gotta be honest with you guys, I didn't totally hate this episode. I actually enjoyed watching it. And as I said, maybe it's a product of me expecting the absolute worst and this one was not it. So overall, I did enjoy the episode, but looking at it from an objective standpoint, it's, you know, it's decent at best. Prediction for next episode, so you can skip here to avoid spoilers. Since episode 7 adapted chapter 94, which is one of the longest chapters in One Punch Man and a few pages from chapter 95, I think episode 8 will safely cover the rest of chapter 95, everything in chapter 96 and a few pages from chapter 97. The episode is named Scroll of the Shinobi, going to contain the full fight of Flash versus Gale, Wind and Hellfire Flame. This is literally my favorite fight of the whole series, and this is considered to be one of the most beautifully illustrated battle in manga history. So I'm guessing Mr. Aoki would have some cuts here, but even with that, I'm not really expecting them to subtly make it look good. I'm totally expecting the same kind of animation they gave for Wind and Flame's sparring session in episode 3.
Too slow and too stiff.
But nonetheless, this is the episode where Flashy Flash shines the most, and for that specific reason, we're preparing a matchup video that talks about the characters, so stay tuned after this episode airs. This episode would also contain some bits from Child Emperor searching for Waganma, who's the hostage kid, and I predict that they'll end the episode with either Phoenix Man showing up or G5 confronting Child Emperor. Either scenes would work fine as a cliffhanger. Remember that the producer hyped up episode 9 alongside the peak we've seen in episode 5? So I'm guessing that specific episode will have the fight between Phoenix Man and Child Emperor. It's also where we will find out if they are going to adapt the pre-Ratcon chapter as they teased in the opening, or maybe those scenes are supposed to be nothing but Easter eggs. Either way, episode 8 is where the real action starts, and I'm not really having any higher expectations. Now, do I think overall this episode is great? Not really. It's much better than the previous disaster that is episode 6, that according to ratings is considered to be the worst anime episode of all time. So being much better than literally the worst episode in history isn't really a feat. This episode contained the same production problems, bad transitions, weird pacing, questionable usage of soundtrack at times, and overall a broken episode. And trust me when I say this, specifically regarding this episode, it's much better to go read chapter 94. Characters are more alive, more familiar, more focused on, and obviously much better art. Now, if you guys want more One Punch Man content, power scaling, reviews, etc., make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. I'm currently working on several videos, so make sure to be here. Until next time, please take good care.